YouTubers, gamers, and moviegoers, what's going on, guys? I'm the Messiah. This is Messiah Entertainment, and today we are reviewing Bumblebee, guys. This is the latest installment in the Transformers universe, but they switch it up a little bit. This time, they're doing a solo film specifically for Bumblebee. After the war on Cybertron, Bumblebee finds his way over to Earth looking to establish a new base for the Autobots. After an encounter with the US government and a few Decepticons, Bumblebee finds himself badly damaged, and not too long after, in the care of a young girl played by Hailee Steinfeld. Over time, the two grow close together and must find a way to keep the world safe from the Decepticons, all the while having to remain hidden from the US government. After that last Michael Bay Transformers film, I have to admit, I was completely done with Transformers. It felt like they were just making the same movie with slightly different tweaks. There's always some kind of big device, world-ending, world-saving device that they have to find, and the bad guy's always after it. And after a while, there was just so many throwaway Transformers that nobody cared about. And then Mark Wahlberg was in it, and it was like it just needed to stop. After that last one, I was completely done. I couldn't believe that they were already announcing other films. I was not surprised when they took that Transformers, Transformers 6 off the production slate. They only stuck to Bumblebee because I think by then that film was already in production, so they had to continue with it. I was hugely skeptical of a solo Bumblebee film, especially after the whole fighting the Nazis thing that they tried to do with it. I was just completely 100% done with it. However, shortly after, the trailers started coming in for Bumblebee, and quickly you started to realize this was a completely different type of film from your typical Transformers experience. The trailers alone seemed like it was going to be less of this big bombastic action fest with very little story, and more of like an Iron Giant kind of feel, or Pete's Dragon sort of feel, where somebody finds some big creature and they befriend it. And I really liked the way the trailers were going in that direction, and the film completely follows up on that. There's still some awesome action in this movie, however, it never reaches that, over-the-top ridiculous level that it did in the previous Transformers film. There's a great sequence in the very beginning of the film about the war on Cybertron, and there's a few times when you might flash back to that sequence, but it's really freaking cool. Like, I kind of wish there was a movie, or at least a much larger section in the film that focused particularly on what's going on in Cybertron, because honestly, it looks really cool. I wasn't a big fan of the whole Generation 1 Transformers. The really only introduction I had into Transformers was the Michael Bay films, but to see something that looks kind of different, I felt like it was really cool, and the way the Transformers move in those scenes and the way Optimus Prime was moving in those scenes made me want to see a lot more of them. And I think while before in the previous Transformer films, while Bumblebee could do some cool things and was cool at many times, this movie really kind of made him this nice, likable, lovable, gentle giant sort of creature in this one. But he's also, in many scenes, quite a badass. Don't get me wrong, Bumblebee had his moments in the original Transformers films, but he always, whether he was getting his legs blasted off or somebody was about to execute him, he always felt like he was probably the youngest of the Transformers. He was the one that, maybe in a few years he might get better, but he always just kind of seemed a bit more of the rookie. It kind of shows the origin of him doing the voice thing through the radio and whatnot. I think the 1987 sort of time period piece sort of thing, it really was cool too. It added a bit of style to it. Hailee Steinfeld was awesome in this movie. I liked the way they developed her character with, her dad having passed away, and, her working on cars and being very savvy with that sort of thing. I think she made for a really interesting character. Way more interesting than Sam Witwicky or Mr. Inventor over here. John Cena was actually really good in this movie. He wasn't like this big, dumb military rock. You know how in these movies the military guy tends to be a bit too, we gotta just destroy all the Transformers because they're evil, and he actually has a bit of sense, and a lot of what he says actually does kind of make sense. He wasn't quite just a big, dumb military guy, and he was actually pretty funny through the movie. Crazy thing is, this film has a much smaller cast of people than any of the other Transformers films, and I'm talking in terms of humans and of Transformers. There's only one Transformer that we have to get in tune with. There's only two villains that we have to get in tune with. The movie thus has a lot more time to just get us in touch with these specific characters. Whereas the other films, there was like 5 or 6 or 7, 8 Autobots on the team at any one time, other than maybe the very first 2007 Transformers, where it was like it had a moderate sized Autobot roster that we could get in tune with. The rest of the films had a bunch of throwaway Autobots that, honestly, I couldn't tell you their names if I tried. There was the one that turned into a helicopter, a samurai one, there was a scientist one, there was the bike ones that I'd never seen again, the two racist ones. There were so many different just Transformers jammed into these films just because they looked cool. It never had, you know, any emotional impact on the story. Whereas in this film, when a Transformer dies, you feel it. You're like, oh, finally, we finally got that guy. Or, oh, man, this is really sad when Bumblebee almost gets hurt. You know what I mean? Before, Autobots would die left and right, and you wouldn't care at all because you don't know them. But this film, there's only one Autobot for you to get in touch with. There's only a few humans that you actually really are supposed to care about in this movie. And with that, you know, you care about all the characters way more. And like I was talking about earlier, there's no super big weapon of mass destruction in a pyramid or some Allspark that they're chasing after. No matrix of leadership or none of that. No Excalibur sword, nothing. There's no big, you know, ending the world type of machine that they have to go for. The only thing that they have to stop is the Decepticons from, you know, broadcasting a message. That's it. And that makes so much more sense, and it's, you know, I can get on board with that way more than having to go on this trip all across the country and all across the globe trying to look for something. No, it just was a regular story about trying to find a home for the Autobots, and I like that. The funny thing is, while this movie does kind of have some throwbacks to the original Transformers films, and, you know, there's Sector 7. Sector 7 obviously is based inside of the Hoover Dam. You know, there's small callbacks like that. Even, you know, the movie doesn't really make sense if you try to line up the continuity. You know, you have to ask yourself, okay, where's Megatron? Okay, why does Bumblebee seem to be the first Transformer here? Why do they not seem to understand this? You know what I'm saying? There's a few things that don't make sense in terms of the continuity. However, in sacrifice of that, we get a really good, solid story. And the movie doesn't, it chooses not to focus on that, tries not to build some bigger universe. It throws in some of those callbacks for some of the fans like me who've been a part of the franchise since it began, but, you know, it doesn't focus on it, and I'm totally fine with that. Sort of like how X-Men does things. The continuity doesn't make sense 100% of the time, but at least they're focused on making the best movie and telling the best story that they can, which is what I've been desperately wanting to see from Transformers for the longest time. I gotta admit, I am 100% back on board with Transformers if this is the direction that we start taking from now on. Yeah, Michael Bay, it says he produced it, but it doesn't feel like a Michael Bay movie at all. This feels like a completely different beast on its own, and I loved it. I absolutely 100% loved it. I would love to see a sequel to Bumblebee, bring the whole cast back, bring Haley Steinfeld back, bring Bumblebee back, bring the rest of the Transformers in. You know, don't inflate it too much. That was a problem last time, but, you know, bring a few more characters in and do movies more like this. I'm loving this style. You know, enough with the way too big, bombastic sort of stuff. Just take, you know, almost take a step back and just, you know, tell a nice, you know, nice story with everything. I don't know if it's my favorite Transformers film. It may very well be. I do have a special place in my heart for the very first one. You know, I remember sitting in the theater for that very first one and just being, you know, blown away with how awesome I thought that movie was. So, you know, it kind of sits on the same level as that one, but in terms of where the Transformers universe was going versus where it is after this movie was amazing. I absolutely loved the hell out of it. I would love to see a sequel, a part 2 to this film. I don't know how they're doing at the box office right now, but I really hope that they are because I really like this film. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure you guys got your own. Let me know in the comment section down below. What did you guys think of Bumblebee? Did you love it? Did you hate it? As always, you guys can follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe, guys. That's it for today. I'm the Messiah. This is Messiah Entertainment. I will see you guys next time. Peace.